as our listeners and our supporters know by now, after having heard from Chairwoman Janet Elkire from the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe, the United States Army Corps of Engineers, with whom we have a controverted at arm's length relationship with for almost a century now. You know, my mother, her mother, my grandmother, all of our people that lived along the Minnesota, the Missouri River, were what you would call the victim of war crimes. They were ethnically cleansed from our most fertile lands by the United States Army Corps of Engineers and the Bureau of Reclamation. Now, because the Dakota Access Pipeline, because Energy Transfer Partners instigated an act of international aggression and trespass against the Sioux Nation, against the Oceti Sakowin, against all of the constituent bands of that confederacy, including what are now called tribal governments, the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation, the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation, Oglala Lakota Nation, and so forth. Energy Transfer Partners, Kelsey Warren, Donald Trump, all instigated and conspired to commit and coordinate violations of international treaty rights, human rights, and possibly an ongoing criminalization of water protectors, of environmentally conscious people. I'm just giving you a little bit of a backdrop of a recap of what we've been through. We've been helping to advise the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe and Chairwoman Janet Elkire for 3 years now. And we've been waiting for this draft environmental impact statement for a long time. And the Army Corps finally released it, which tells us, you know, they list 5 alternatives, 5 items or 5 pathways that the Army Corps intends to take. And we'll go over some of those for you, but let me just say that the fact that they offer in these alternatives the idea that in the easement, which is not granted at this time, which means that the Dakota Access Pipeline is functioning illegally. Right now, Energy Transfer Partners and the state of North Dakota and anybody else who has interest in the Bakken oil field in that whole pipeline is making, I don't know what they make, depending on the price of oil, $100 million a day. Could be more. They're pumping 570,000 barrels of oil through that pipeline every single day. So they're making insane money. Not the American people, not the tribal nations, not anybody who is being forced to live in a sacrifice zone, but the Kelsey Warrens of the world, the Donald Trumps of the world, whoever has backroom shady deals with big extraction. And we're finding ourselves confronting big extraction on all levels. But the fact that the Army Corps is now saying, look, one of these alternatives is that we will not grant this easement and we will have to reroute the pipeline or cease operations as they currently exist. That could mean yanking that pipeline out of the ground. But they also offer other alternatives which do not bode well for the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe and the Oceti Sakowin. And anyone who finds themselves up against the criminalization, the constitutional rights violation, the human rights violations that big extraction has been found to be engaged in. If you recall, they labeled us religiously driven indigenous jihadis. They labeled us eco-terrorists, eco-jihadis, and you see that was the kind of not the start, but one of the seminal moments in the uptick in that effort to criminalize dissent. People who are dissenting from a potential corporate fascistic intrusion on our lives know exactly what we're talking about here at Lakota Law and the Romero Institute, know exactly what we're fighting for. And so I don't remember exactly what those other alternatives specifically say, but I have a colleague here, Brother Dove, who is a staff attorney at Lakota Law. So just for the benefit of our listeners and our supporters, Dove, could you kind of outline what those alternatives are?
Yeah, I will. Thanks, Chase. Chase hit it on the nose. And, the overarching issue here is, as Chase said, oil's been flowing through a pipeline that doesn't have a valid EIS. And even if we're to sit here and in our idealistic world not have this pipeline, the government's own laws say that you need a valid environmental impact statement when a pipeline is built, and especially when it exists and is built on federal land. And this pipeline EIS concerns a 2-mile segment of the pipeline that crosses under Lake Oahe and the Missouri River, and that lake is the 4th largest reservoir in the United States, and it's controlled by the Army Corps of Engineers, as they control a lot of reservoirs and dam sites across the country. And the big question with this thing is, well, it's a 2-mile segment. What about the rest of the 1,200 miles of this pipeline? Well, this water crossing is crucial. Without this water crossing, they can't get the oil across one of the biggest rivers on the continent, and they can't get it all the way to Illinois, where the oil is supposed to flow. So there's 5 alternatives that the EIS, and we'll get into the EIS itself, but there's 5 alternatives that the EIS lays out that will be considered over the next few months. One is that the easement for this segment of the pipeline is not granted, meaning that segment won't be allowed to proceed, even though for the last several years it has been in function. It will be stopped if that's the path that the EIS ends up deciding on. There's a few other options. The easement's granted, and not only is the easement granted, but the oil flow is doubled from what now is 570,000 barrels per day to over 1.1 million barrels per day. That's a significant uptick. I mean, 570,000 barrels per day sounds like plenty, but now imagine doubling that and flowing under, as I said, one of the largest rivers in the country, and also a river of sacred importance to many communities out there. Obviously, starting with tribal nations, but there's people that live and rely on the water that aren't just Native people. There's 2 other pathways. One is, as Chase suggested, a pipeline reroute. So if the easement isn't granted, the pipeline will be rerouted about 120 miles north through North Bismarck. And the irony of that is that was the original plan. 10 years ago, when this pipeline was getting its feet off the ground, that was the plan, to build this pipeline through Bismarck. And the predominantly white community up there, no matter their politics, no matter how much they love big oil, they didn't want a pipeline in their backyard, because any thinking person doesn't want a pipeline in their backyard. It doesn't matter how much money you want to make off of it. So now they're suggesting, well, if this segment's stopped, we can reroute it north. That would be a significant shift, because not only would they have to stop the flow of oil under this lake and the Missouri River, they would likely have to dig up that section and rebuild it entirely. And it's not an ideal option, but for many people on our side of tribal sovereignty, better that a pipeline doesn't cross over native land, or at least reservation land, if the communities that, generally speaking, don't have the interests of Native people at heart, if they can bear the burden. That's rarely the case in this country, but and there's a 4th option, which is a little bit technical and wordy, but it's basically the easement will be granted with a number of additional conditions. And this seems to be a very likely route for the Army Corps, just because it sets in motion a bunch of monitoring processes and cooperation mechanisms between tribal governments, state governments, federal agencies, And the EIS goes into depth about this process, which includes things like groundwater monitoring, fish and wildlife protection. But the short answer is that there's 5 pathways. 2 of those pathways are called no action alternatives, which means that the current segment that's stretching under the Missouri River will be stopped, and the other 3 are called action alternatives. 2 of those will allow the easement under the river and the lake to proceed, and the 5th would just reroute the entire pipeline north. So those are the 5 kind of wordy options. And to be clear, this is a 500-page environmental impact statement with a 1,200-page appendix. So this is a 2,000-page document that is going to take even the most well-versed legal scholars and environmental scientists to break down. And obviously, that's a lot harder for members of the public and tribal leaders to process as well.
Thank you for that, Dove. There's a couple of, right now we are supporting the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. We're supporting the entire Ocheti Shakoi and anyone who has rights to the Missouri River. And even our friends, there's 18 million Americans who are relying on the integrity of the Missouri River. They don't have, meaning DAPL, Energy Transfer Partners, the Army Corps of Engineers, they don't have it together in terms of what they would do in the event of a catastrophic spill. Because we've been working directly with Chairwoman Alkire's cabinet, her staff of advisors, legal advisors, technical experts, emergency managers, former tribal historic preservation officers, people who are institutionally invested and knowledgeable in all of the ways that these modern tribal governments are forced to interface with the colony of the United States of America. They are not prepared for a catastrophic spill. One of the plans that the Army Corps had in case of a catastrophic spill was to truck in 18 million bottles of water. Now, if you've lived on Standing Rock, that's where I grew up. I remember when, because of the way the Army Corps manages the Missouri River, our water systems broke down in 2006, 2007, right around there. I was in law school. I remember this because my mom called me. There's no water in the entire res. The hospital had to shut down. All of our dialysis patients, everybody who needed critical care had to be transported out. When I say that we live in the fourth world, we live in sacrifice zones. The Army Corps doesn't care. They're putting out these alternatives, and we need your help. We need to support the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. We need to support this petition calling on the Army Corps of Engineers to stop this illegal pipeline. Not only is the Army Corps admitting that the pipeline is operating illegally by saying they might not grant the easement, meaning you have to have an environmental impact statement done in order to have that easement. And you know who they had doing that environmental analysis in the beginning when Trump was president and prior to that? Energy Resource Management. They are a firm that is a member of the American Petroleum Institute, and they filed an amicus brief against the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. This is who the Army Corps had hired to do this environmental analysis. Let me take you back just very quickly. If you remember, they were doing a lower level analysis. You know, an environmental impact statement is a higher level, more thorough legal analysis that is mandated by NEPA. While they were doing a lower level analysis, it's called an environmental analysis, and we were all hoping that then President Barack Obama would deny the easement that was being sought by the Army Corps of Engineers. You know, DAPL, Energy Transfer Partners, was petitioning the Army Corps of Engineers to grant them this easement. And it took 3,000 uniformed United States veterans, combat veterans, brothers and sisters who'd been to Afghanistan, who'd been in Iraqi freedom, brothers and sisters who'd been in Desert Storm, Desert Shield, perhaps even Vietnam. I mean, in all theaters of conflict, United States veterans came to stand on the right side of history, and we were able to put pressure on the United States government at all levels of security. We were able to put constructive pressure on them to deny this easement. That's the kind of pressure that we need to put on them right now. It happened on December 4th, 2016. It happened. We celebrated a victory, but Trump was already coming into office. And you know how that guy does things. That he's a criminal. He used to be a smooth criminal, but he's not a smooth criminal anymore. He's just a straight up criminal. And he forced the Secretary of the Army to issue this easement without the proper environmental impact statement, without properly following federal law. Now they're trying to just flippantly throw out there that they could double the flow of the oil. And the last thing that I'll say right now is that Tim Mintz, that is the first tribal historic preservation officer in the history of tribal historic preservation, pursuant to the National Historic Preservation Act in 1992. Tim Mintz, who is part of Janet Al-Qaeda's team of advisors, is expressing concerns about human remains. And when Tim and the Standing Rock team express concerns about human remains or cultural resources, just the same way that they did September 2nd, 2016, we filed in United States District Court and Circuit Court. We filed intelligence, information that told the United States court, the federal court system, that, hey, there are several sites that are very precious to us. They're very special. We need to protect these sites. Here they are. Can you issue an injunction and protect these sites? Do you know what the Energy Transfer Partners legal team did? They shared that information with the Dakota Access Pipeline team, and they moved their construction equipment almost 20 miles to destroy those very sites that Tim Mintz had identified. Energy Transfer Partners is a bad actor. Their record is replete with oil spills. They have a horrible record. They can't even contract federally with the United States government right now. They couldn't, as Pete Capicella says, they couldn't sell them candy bars right now. So we need all hands on deck. And this fight is not over. It seems like a long time. It's been going on 6 or 7 years. But I grew up with this fight. I grew up with my uncle and everybody who is with the Standing Rock Sioux tribal government, and the list of chairwomen and chairmen who've served the Standing Rock Sioux tribe and the Ocheti Shakoi. I've been hearing about the Missouri River, the Army Corps of Engineers, our treaty rights and our human rights all of my life. And it's a privilege and an honor to be able to ask for your assistance today.
You know, it's tricky right now because it's negative, right, to still be fighting for a pipeline's end. But there's some good news to think about. I mean, the last time a draft EIS was published, 50,000 comments were submitted, and almost all of those comments were in favor of stopping this pipeline. They were largely about environmental justice and tribal sovereignty. This current draft EIS mentions that. And so people are surprised. I mean, in 2017, when Trump pushed ahead with this pipeline, most of us probably thought that was the end of it. And maybe those in the deep corners of the tribal sovereignty fight weren't totally at a loss yet. But now we're at a place where there's still a chance to stop this pipeline, and we have a presidential administration that cares about its political reputation. It's lost the progressive caucus. It's lost progressive support. But there's other elements here. I mean, Chase mentioned this crookedness of the consulting firm, Environmental Resource Management, not only are they a member of the American Petroleum Institute, which is the fossil fuel lobby, the literal fossil fuel lobby, they contract regularly with Energy Transfer Partners, which is the operator and builder of this pipeline. And the current EIS, while not fully prepared by this consulting firm, is largely prepared by it. And it's so laughable that this consulting firm was specifically appointed to write the environmental justice portion of this environmental impact statement. I don't know how you could trust a fossil fuel consulting firm to write an environmental justice component of any assessment, but that just goes to show you how twisted everything is right now. And it's complicated. You know, the EIS blames Standing Rock. It says Standing Rock hasn't cooperated over the last few years. And well, you wonder why, because when your tribal members and your allies are being shot on tribal land, you know, res land, you think you can trust the Army Corps? You think you can trust the federal agencies that are here to steal and corroborate or conspire with industry? You can't. So, and the other tricky part of this too is that, you know, there is a glimmer of hope in the EIS that there's a pathway to shutting down this pipeline, or at least in the very best worst case, rerouting it away from the res and pushing it north through a white community, which, you know, at the end of the day, we don't want anyone to deal with this. We just want this pipeline, this black snake stopped. But they trust that Dakota Access will manage this pipeline. They speak about the risk of spills and if it's likely to happen. Well, don't worry, the pipeline company has a plan in place. They even mention human remains that Chase was referring to. They say Dakota Access will deal with unanticipated discoveries according to their own established procedures. Can you trust a pipeline company to respect sacred sites? Can you trust a pipeline company to respect the bones and burial sites of Native people? I don't think so. I mean, I'm pretty sure those things don't go together. And so we got to find a way for this pipeline to be stopped. But before that happens, we need to find a way to make sure that any environmental impact statement is not just comprehensive, but isn't crooked and isn't written and carried out by agencies and entities that have a massive interest in this pipeline being built. So there's more to say, and I want to leave it to Chase if he has other things to.
I have a closing thought, and that is, I forget. This is it's so complex. I forget everything that has gone down. I would encourage our supporters to listen to the Water Wars series. This is done in cooperation, in partnership with Chairwoman Janet Alkire. And one of the first things that the chairwoman did when she took office was she asked the Army Corps of Engineers to share all of the sensitive, confidential information that they had used to permit and to go forward with the pipeline as it is, because before all they had was a bunch of redacted documents. And so the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, first they entered into a status known as that of a cooperating agency, meaning they work with the United States Army Corps of Engineers and they're supposed to get unredacted information. They're supposed to get the truth. And what Janet found is that the Army Corps gave her a bunch more of redacted documents. So all the Standing Rock Sioux tribe has ever been asking for, all we have ever been asking for with the Oceti-Sakowin, is the truth and the ability to prepare for a worst case scenario discharge and to be able to participate in the development of our homelands. We're never seen as partners. You know, there's hundreds of millions of dollars being made every single day. The Oceti-Sakowin is not getting any transfer fees. Right now, that is an illegal trespass on our nation. And those legal scholars out there who've studied the nature of colonial rule and federal Indian law as they've invented it know that tribal nations have superior predecessor sovereign standing to challenge the corporations and those who seek to continue to degrade the human species and the American citizen, they know that most of the American people are not flexing the full panoply of our rights. They know that we've been lulled with the process of colonization. It's just not just native people who've been colonized. But Janet Alkire withdrew the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe status as a cooperating agency because she was not getting the truth, because she and other leaders only ever wanted the truth from the Army Corps of Engineers. They withdrew as a cooperating agency. And now the Army Corps of Engineers is trying to throw shade at the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. So we, once again, we need your help, and we look forward to continuing this fight. There's a lot of important items on our plate that are coming up in the United States Congress, and hopefully with Secretary Deb Haaland. There's the Pihimaha run is happening September 12th, and they are seeking Deb Haaland. They're calling on Deb Haaland, Chairman Arlen Melendez from the Reno Sparks Indian community and the Oxfam camp both, and all of the other Paiute Shoshone people who are there, who are going to be forced to live in that sacrifice zone, are calling on Deb Haaland to visit Thacker Pass, visit Pihimaha. We continue to support those who are being targeted in the SLAP suit there. If you want more information on that, go to the appropriate links. We'll include those. And lastly, Congress is about to meet on the unidentified aerial phenomenon, but we'll save that discussion for another time.
I don't know if this is the time to add it, but there's just one quote I want to pull from the EIS that was dropped, and it just kind of brings all this nonsense to a head. So Chase has mentioned, and it's obvious that spills are inevitable. Every pipeline that's ever been built on Turtle Island has had spills, and not one or two, but countless. And so many of them happen that we don't even know about them. They just happen on a daily basis in places that don't see the light of day, or at least people's eyes. And there's one quote, and it says that if spills were to occur, those events would be minor because, quote, oil is buoyant and would naturally form a layer on top of water where it can be collected. Wow. And then it goes to say that, quote, there are conventional techniques that already exist to address spills. So not only is this EIS acknowledging that spills are inevitable, it's suggesting that it's not that big of a deal because you can clean oil off of water. If you're anybody who's gone fishing or anybody who's gone swimming, you've drank out of the water in your area, you've grown food with the water in your area, you know that once oil's in that water will never be the same. And maybe you can skim some of it off, but you're not going to get all of it. And so this is a clash between epistemologies and worldviews. You have a worldview of take, conquer, not thinking about the earth, the people that rely on it, our animal relatives. And then you have a worldview of care and give and love and stewardship. And it's not, I hate to frame it as a 1 versus 2 or a 0 versus 1 or us versus them, but it is an us versus them. And we have a government of this country, this United States, a young country that will consistently take the sides of industry before it takes the sides of the people. And this is about the people, and this is about the earth. And if we keep pushing this pipeline could be stopped. It's not a done deal right now, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and we need your support and we need your comments.
Let me include one, just to almost like a scripted thing, but the comment period could be open for a month. It could be open for 90 days. We want to flood the Army Corps of Engineers with your support. We want to support the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe in its effort to defend its territorial integrity. On behalf of the Sioux Nation, on behalf of the Ocheti Shakoi, I want to say thank you. Lila Wopila Tanka, Ichichapelo.